The house was too quiet for a Friday evening. Grace sat in the dim kitchen, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea she'd already forgotten she'd made. The clock ticked loudly in the background, the only companion she had as the sky outside dimmed to a muted grey. Her phone lay silent beside her. No calls. No texts. Richard was still at the office, probably wouldn't be back until after midnight, if he came home at all. Lately, he was more shadow than spouse, passing through her life like fog slipping between trees. She didn't even remember the last time he looked at her, really looked at her. There were no fights, no harsh words. Just the kind of silence that eats away at your ribs from the inside out. Then came the soft knock at the door. She opened it to find Noah, standing there with his suitcase and tired eyes. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. His voice had changed, deeper than she remembered. But his eyes were still the same ones she used to wipe tears from, the ones that looked up to her after scraped knees and scary dreams. Grace pulled him into a hug, more for herself than for him. Noah had been staying in the guest room for 4 days now. At first, it felt like a reunion. They talked late into the night, mostly about nothing. Streaming shows, bad takeout, old memories of his mother, her sister. It was easy and familiar. But then, somewhere between the shared meals and the soft laughter, something shifted. It was a rainy evening when it happened. The power had flickered twice, and Grace had lit a candle on the coffee table. They were watching an old movie. Noah had draped a blanket over both their legs without asking. She hadn't moved away. "I missed this," he said, not looking at her. "This. You. The warmth in this house. The way you care." She smiled softly, then turned back to the screen. But she could feel his gaze lingering on her cheek, then her neck, then lower. "I used to think you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen," he said suddenly. Grace's breath caught. She laughed it off. "Noah. I'm serious." He shifted toward her. "I used to think, if I ever became half the man I wanted to be, it would be because you raised me that way." She looked at him then, really looked. The boy she once guided through school dances and heartbreak was now a man. Broad shoulders, defined jawline, that quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to carry pain without showing it. She swallowed. "That's sweet of you." "It's not meant to be sweet," he said, softer now. "I mean it." The candlelight flickered as thunder cracked outside. His hand was close to hers now, not touching, but hovering. Grace could feel the heat from his palm, closer than it should have been. Still, she didn't move. "Are you happy?" he asked. She looked down. "I don't know anymore." "Does he make you feel wanted?" She didn't answer. The silence said enough. He reached for her hand slowly, deliberately. His fingers grazed hers, barely making contact, but enough to feel like fire. "Noah," she whispered, but it didn't carry any weight. No threat. No command. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said. "I see you. I've always seen you." She turned her head, eyes locked on his. Her breathing changed, shallow, uneven. The space between them thinned to something invisible. She could smell his cologne, the warmth of his skin, the rain outside coating the windows in soft static. "I shouldn't feel this way," she said. "But you do," he replied. She stood abruptly, pulling her hand away. "I'm going to bed." He didn't stop her. He just sat there, calm, steady, as if he'd expected this part. Grace closed the door to her bedroom behind her, heart racing, skin warm, face flushed. She leaned against the wood and closed her eyes. It had been so long since someone saw her, really saw her. She turned off the lights and crawled under the covers, but sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his, dark, focused, full of something dangerous. Then, just as she began to drift, she heard a soft knock at her door. And his voice. "You always wanted someone to look at you like that. Then let me try." The knock lingered in the air like a held breath. Grace didn't move at first. Her hand rested on her chest, feeling the erratic beat beneath her ribs. The clock on the nightstand read 12:08. The house was silent, save for the steady rain and that voice, still hanging just outside her door. She sat up slowly, every part of her reasoning telling her not to answer. But something deeper, older, lonelier, moved her legs to the floor and her hand to the doorknob. She opened it. Noah stood there, hair slightly damp, a soft look in his eyes that didn't belong to a boy anymore. He didn't step forward. He didn't smile. He just waited. Grace whispered, "You shouldn't be here." He didn't argue. Instead, he said, "I know you feel it too. I just needed you to know, you're not invisible. Not to me." Her breath caught again. That word, invisible, echoed in her chest like a crack in stained glass. Richard hadn't touched her in 15 months. He hadn't even asked how her day was. She couldn't remember the last time someone reached for her without expectation, just to hold her there, in a moment. Noah took a half step forward, and still, she didn't stop him. His hand reached up and brushed her hair behind her ear. The gesture was slow, reverent. "I'll go," he said quietly. "Just say the word." But she didn't. Instead, she stepped back, wordlessly, letting the space widen between them, not to push him away, but to allow him in. He came in without touching her again. They stood in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, not speaking, not needing to. She felt everything in the silence. Years of dismissal. Forgotten birthdays. Cold dinners and lonely beds. And in front of her stood the only person in the world who had looked her in the eyes and made her feel real again. When he moved toward her, she closed her eyes, not out of shame, but surrender. The kiss was slow. Careful. Like he was afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. Her hands trembled when they met his chest, but she didn't pull away. His lips tasted of rain and warmth, and when he whispered her name, it didn't sound like a boy's voice anymore. It was a man's voice. A man who saw her. She let him pull her closer. The covers folded back without a word. The room smelled of lavender lotion and new beginnings. There were no moans, no gasps, just the sound of rain on the windows and skin meeting skin with trembling honesty. There was a moment, somewhere in the quiet blur, where she looked up and truly saw him. And he looked down like she was everything. For the first time in years, she didn't feel used. She didn't feel ignored. She didn't feel like a placeholder in someone else's life. She felt wanted. Afterward, she curled into the sheets, facing the wall. Her body still hummed with sensation, but her mind was already spiraling. What had she done? Noah lay beside her, propped on one elbow. "Grace," he said softly. She didn't respond. "I don't regret it," he said. "I don't know if I should, but I don't." She finally turned to face him. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I raised you." "No," he said firmly. "You protected me. You cared for me when no one else would. But I'm not a child anymore." He reached for her hand. "I saw you breaking, and no one even noticed." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You should go to bed," she murmured. "We'll talk tomorrow." He nodded. There was no anger in his eyes. No fear. Just the kind of stillness that comes from someone who's finally said what they've been holding for years. When he closed the door behind him, Grace turned toward the pillow and exhaled like she hadn't in months. Her chest felt light, but her heart felt heavy. In the hallway, the soft creak of floorboards faded into silence. She knew the truth of what had just happened. It wasn't a mistake born out of impulse. It was something deeper. And far more dangerous. The morning light felt colder than usual. Grace sat at the edge of her bed, a robe wrapped tightly around her body, though the chill wasn't in the air, it was in her bones. The memory of last night hadn't faded like a dream. It clung to her skin, threaded through her thoughts, refusing to loosen its grip. She didn't know what to expect when she walked into the kitchen. Noah wasn't there. Just a folded piece of paper beside the coffee pot, with her name written in his careful handwriting. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. But I'm not sorry for how I feel. I meant every word." She read it twice. Then again. Her hand trembled as she pressed the note to her chest, eyes closing. She didn't cry. Not yet. The sound of keys in the front door made her jump. Richard walked in wearing the same suit he left in 2 days ago. His tie was crooked, his eyes bleary, and his phone still in his hand. He looked around the house like a man visiting someone else's life. Grace hadn't seen him in nearly 48 hours. He glanced at her and gave a tired nod. Hey! She waited. Nothing else came. No questions. No concern. He set his briefcase down and walked straight to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water like this was routine. Were you going to call? She asked quietly. He shrugged. I figured you knew I'd be tied up with meetings. Tied up, she repeated, her voice hollow. He looked at her now, finally. Is something wrong? Everything. She wanted to scream that she wasn't a shadow. That she had been here, every day, begging to be seen without saying the words out loud. That she had crossed a line last night, but the marriage had already crumbled long before her feet stepped over it. Instead, she said, do you even know what color my eyes are? Richard blinked. What? You've been married to me for 20 years. Look at me right now and tell me what color they are. He squinted, like trying to see something far away. They're brown. Green, she said. They've always been green. She pushed past him, walked to the sink, and stared at her reflection in the window. She didn't look like the woman who once said vows under oak trees and fairy lights. She looked like someone trying to crawl out of her own skin. Grace, Richard said, confused, tired, disconnected. What's going on? She almost told him. Almost confessed everything. Noah's touch, her body responding, the shame that still lingered in the sheets upstairs. But she didn't. Because it wasn't about Noah, not really. It was about the silence between them that had stretched for years, until someone else filled it with the sound of her name said like it mattered. Richard muttered something about needing a shower and disappeared down the hallway. She stood there for a long time after he left the room. The coffee grew cold again. The note remained pressed against her palm. Later that afternoon, she heard the front door creak open again. Noah had returned. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there, backpack over his shoulder, keys in his hand. I can't stay, he said. I know, she replied. They both stood still for a moment, suspended in the unsaid. I don't regret it, he said again, voice softer now. But I also didn't mean to confuse you, or make things harder. Grace stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. You didn't confuse me. You just reminded me I was still alive. Noah nodded slowly, a sad understanding passing between them. I'm going to leave town. Clear my head. Start over, he said. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe, she whispered. But it still hurt. He stepped toward her, one last time, and took her hand. Held it like something precious. Like someone who'd meant every touch, even the forbidden ones. Then he let go. When the door closed behind him, Grace didn't collapse. She walked to the drawer in the hallway, opened it, and quietly removed her wedding ring. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just set it down. The sun had started to break through the clouds. The rain had stopped. The porch was slick and gleaming. She stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cool wood under her feet as she looked up at the sky. Grace didn't know what came next. She only knew this. She wasn't invisible anymore.